Jazakallah khair for the invite to allow me to speak here. I've got a tough act to follow, given all the speakers who have spoken already, and the intensity and the emotion with which they spoke. So I apologize in advance if I seem a little bit more dull. But I'm not used to public speaking, so please bear with me. So my name is Dr. Israr. I've worked in hospitals in Gaza during this genocide on 3 separate occasions as an emergency medicine doctor. Today what I want to do is I want to give you a brief insight into each of my trips. What I want to do is, in this short time that we've been allotted, I want to explain to you the impact of the war on the people, how the war machine of Israel has changed the landscape of Gaza, and what some of their not so public aims appear to be. And I will then conclude by informing you of what the people of Gaza have asked me to convey to you directly from them. So my first visit to Gaza was in February 2024. I worked in the south part of Gaza in a hospital in Khan Yunis called the European General Hospital. It was busy and hectic. It was not like anything that I've experienced before in my life at all. And I've been a doctor for more than 20 years. It was just chaos. That's the best word that I could use. There was not even time to stop and take a breath or wipe the sweat off my forehead due to the intense bombing and shelling of the civilians. I'm sure you've all seen the pictures and you're all fully aware of the injuries that have been occurring since October the 7th. So for me personally, I felt a numbness to everything. I felt numb because I just did not have a chance to process it all. I was in robot mode. I was just seeing one patient after the other, after the other, after the other. But one of the patients which I remember, and he at that time epitomized for me the people, the civilians of Gaza. He was a man who was in his 50s, who was just a farmer, and who lived in his house with his family, didn't own a weapon, was not military in any sense of the word, and his house was bombed during the middle of the night. As his house was bombed and the surrounding area, the concrete slabs that fell on him. Now imagine when we're sleeping at night and we have the pillow on our face. After about, I don't know about you guys, but if I have the pillow on my face, after about 30 seconds I feel suffocated. He had a huge concrete slab pressing down on the right side of his face. With so much pressure, it had caused his eyeballs to burst. And he was trapped under the rubble for 4 days, screaming and asking, "Sa'iduni, somebody help me, somebody help me." But nobody came to his rescue. On the 5th day though, he heard the footsteps of somebody approaching, and he thought, finally help has come. But as just about he was about to muster the effort to try and call for help, he heard a dog bark, and he heard the unmistakable sound of a bullet hitting flesh to somebody who was nearby. He immediately realized, even though he's blind now and he's weak and exhausted, hasn't eaten anything, he immediately realized that these were IDF soldiers. So they remained there on top of the rubble for another 4 days. Imagine going 8 days without food, without water, and being too afraid to even breathe. When I asked him, "How did you survive?" he said, "I kept saying to Allah, "Oh Allah, the way that you saved Yusuf alayhi salam from the well, and the way that you saved Yunus alayhi salam from the belly of the whale, oh Allah, save me from these people." And he said, then after another 4 days, a total of 8 days, they left and they brought him to the hospital, and he had some reconstructive surgery and he survived. But the spirituality that we heard about these people, I saw it with my own eyes. I saw it evident in front of me. And he was, this is a guy who still had his whole life ahead of him. He had his grandchildren too. He wanted to see grandchildren be born from his children, etc. All these kind of things. Yet he's now got no eye sockets left. His eyes are completely destroyed. But he kept saying, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. At that time in February, what they needed was they needed emergency medical aid in terms of personnel and our voices. They needed our voices to stop the war. They needed our pressure here to stop the war. They needed our countries to apply diplomatic pressure to Israel. And they needed for the US especially to not continually veto UN ceasefire proposals. Because at that time, the people, I could see in their eyes, they still had hope. They still had hope that the war would end and life would go back to normal. They still had this hope. Anyway, when I left, the overwhelming feeling of when I left was a feeling of numbness. 4 weeks later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blessed me with another opportunity to return in Gaza. This time in the last 10 days of Ramadan. And as I went, this time I went into the central area. I went to a place called Deir al-Balah, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, in a hospital that was called Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. What I saw this time was completely different. In the space of 4 weeks, the psyche of the people there had completely changed. Doctors were nearing exhaustion levels, and everyone's patience levels had become quite thin. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you rosy stories and things which will raise your hope and iman in them. I'm telling you the reality of what I've seen on the ground, and it's important, just as the sheikhs have given us reminders to raise and build emotions and stoke the fires of our emotions. It's also important for us to hear the reality of what these people are going through. People now were being killed en masse, and as I said before, there were mass killings happening, but now what I noticed was that there were more sniper injuries. So sniper injuries, you would expect, for them to be sniper headshot kills, you would expect them to be, but they weren't. They were deliberately avoiding the head. They were aiming for the arms, they were aiming for the legs. And who were they aiming on? It was children. I was seeing young girls coming in with their legs blown off. I was seeing young boys coming in with their arms shattered in pieces. And when Dr. Yusuf comes here, I'm sure he'll tell you about some of the orthopedic cases that he's dealt with. And so we saw a change in tact, that on top of the mass killing and the bombings, now they were disabling the next future generation. What they were doing was they were trying to make a burden upon the family, both financially and emotionally. This is psychological warfare as well, not just physical warfare. So naturally, when these kind of things started to happen, and we saw more and more, how can I put it? We saw that the government had completely disbanded the local government that was there. We saw lawlessness come to the fore. At the same time, while this is happening, the screw was starting to turn in terms of aid getting in. They stopped almost completely the aid getting in. And Dr. Yusuf, who's going to come and speak shortly, I'm sure he will corroborate. When we drove through Rafah and we were going through the border, we saw hundreds of trucks lined up outside the border. The second time when I went, the Egyptian army had gotten wind of the fact that people were realizing that trucks were being held up at the border, so they put them inside instead, away from people's eyes. Only those who could travel inside to Gaza were able to see it. They were just parked the other side of the wall, okay, and being left in containers, but at least they were in containers. Because when I went the third time through Israel, the third time in Israel, they were taken out of the containers, left at the mercy of the sun. So all foodstuffs and these kind of things completely destroyed. Anyway, when then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blessed me again with another chance to go, and I've just been for the duration of September. I went back to the central area because I wanted to compare and contrast how it was compared to before. This time, people were exhausted from their being forcibly displaced again and again and again. Imagine this. Imagine that you are living in your house, you get a telephone call for an evacuation order. Get out in 15 minutes. If you're not out of the house, your house will be bombed. What will you take with you? You'll take your children, you'll grab them, you will grab whatever few papers that you have which are important to you, and some few items of clothing. You will take these items and you will go and be sent to the safe zone. Then the psychological impact of the war and the psychological war machine as well. What would happen is 4 weeks later they would be given another notice, just as the people are starting to develop a routine. Get out. This is now an active war zone. You got 15 minutes before we drop the Biden bomb on you. The Biden bomb, by the way, 2,000 pound bomb, okay, which is 1,000 kilos. And the way in which it drops, it penetrates down below the ground 30 meters before it explodes. And then when it explodes from underneath. This time when I was there, they dropped one on the beach where all the refugees were staying. And basically it dropped below the sand, exploded, and it buried everyone underneath the sand. To the point where when the ambulances went out and the medical personnel went out, they couldn't find any bodies. They could not find any bodies. Children, women, all gone, vanished, vaporized in an instant. So what else did we see? We saw mass casualty events. Mass casualty event is defined as an event that overwhelms the local healthcare system, where the number of casualties vastly exceeds the local resources and capabilities in a short time. Guess how many mass casualty events happen in Britain per year? I'll tell you. 3 or 4 mass casualty events, and they normally cause the local NHS system in that area to become a standstill. You know how many mass casualty events we saw in Gaza? Every single day. Every single day. So what happens when these mass casualty events occur? Everything is going to become depleted completely. Hospital supplies, physical energy levels, people start fighting. It becomes the survival of the fittest. The strangulation of food and water going in, the strangulation of money going in. When I went in the first 2 times, when I went through Egypt, they had no restriction on how much money you could take in. There were some Jordanian brothers, may Allah bless them, they bought in rucksacks full of money, and I asked one of them, I said, how much money is in here? He said, $750,000 we've collected. And that was just in one rucksack. But now, when we're going through Israel, because Rafah is completely closed, each person can only take $2,800. So everything has been strangulated. So when this happens, what will the people do? So I saw with my own eyes children running around. As soon as they realize that you're a foreigner, they will come to you and they will start performing circus tricks just so that you give them money. Is this what they've been reduced to? Parents sending their children, I could see at the corner, I might go and ask him for money. Is this what they've been reduced to? Reduced to begging. Things I was told that there had never ever occurred in Gaza before were now occurring. Looting. Before, when the bombs would drop, people would rush to help and pull the people out under the rubble. Now they jump over the people from the rubble and they go and loot the place because they need supplies. Toilet paper that we take for granted, one piece of toilet paper, not the whole roll, one piece of toilet paper, $8. $8. Cigarettes, for instance, when there are people who smoke, they're one cigarette, $20. This is how expensive it has become there because of the strangulation and the embargo of any sort of supplies going into Gaza. And you know, the indiscriminate bombing, it doesn't have to happen. I was there and our hospital was bombed twice. They used Apache Hellfire missiles, made in the US by the way, and other similar weaponry which is made here in the UK for precision surgical strikes on certain tents. So if they want to, and they have surveillance, as soon as you enter, Dr. Yusuf will tell you, as soon as you enter you hear the buzzing of the drones, as soon as you enter they have facial recognition, they know that who you are immediately, and they will track you, and they have hundreds and thousands of drones flying in the air. So there is absolutely no reason why they can't do surgical strikes based on their intelligence, but they decide to go against that. Just a couple of days ago, the masjid that I used to attend for Fajr Salah mostly and for Jummah, it was bombed just 2 days ago in Deir Bala. And I saw the people there, I used to see the refugees, the displaced people living there. None of them were Hamas. or anything like this. Yet they just wanted to have any excuse, and they killed. They were on the messages that I got. There were 24 shuhada from there, over 90 injured, and these are just people sleeping in the masjid because they feel that this is the only safe place for them. And one other thing, knife crime, and everyone carries a weapon now. Why? Because it's survival of the fittest. And the other thing, which I'm embarrassed to say that I saw, but we need to hear this because we need to understand the reality. Prostitution, this has come into the land. When they told me, when the people were telling me, they would cry, they would say, we've never seen anything like this before. But they have driven them to such a state, that basically they are desperate to do these kind of things that were never heard of before. So what can we do? What we can do is right now, what is needed right now is not food, not water. You can give this and you can continue to donate for this, but the most important thing is money. They need money and we need to figure out ways in which to get supplies of money into people, salaries for people, doctors who have been working for the last year without any money. Once we were doing a resuscitation attempt on a five-year-old child who had been caught under the rubble. And whilst I'm giving him oxygen, I'm speaking to another doctor opposite me who's putting a chest drain into him. And he's talking, and he looks up at me and he says to me, he says, Israr, do you think that you and me are the same while you are here? I didn't reply. He said, we are not the same. He said, while you are bagging this child, okay, you are not worrying about your family at home. And he said, while I'm putting this chest drain in, my mind is my child going to come next? Then he said, while you are bagging this child, okay, you don't have to worry about food. Your charity is arranging food for you. He says, I'm thinking, which way am I going to have to go home where there's going to be some food left that I can buy? And he says, while you are bagging this child, you're not thinking about water. You've brought your water filters with you. I'm thinking I'm going to have to wait 2 hours in this queue after my shift to take bottles of water home, waiting at a truck to be given water. And last thing I want to finish with, just a few points, because I did promise. There was a few of the doctors there on my last few nights. They came and huddled. We used to do mostly a night shift because that's when the bombings used to happen. So we'd be ready in A&E. But they huddled around me in a rare occasion when it was a little bit quiet. And I said to them, look, I'm going back. I'm going to be addressing some people. I want you to tell me what you want me to tell them from your mouths. They said the following. They said, please, please, please make us human. Do not make us superhuman. This is a very important point. Said, because if in the long run it harms us, because when we are made out to be these superhuman beings who have so much sabr and who have so much strength of iman and this and the other, it naturally will lead people to start thinking, it's okay, they can deal with it, it's okay. So he goes, please tell them that we are still human. He says, if you are going to be our voice, then take time out to speak to us about what we want you to say. Make contact with us, speak to us. Otherwise, if you don't use your voice, and this is directly quote, they said, be our voice, don't remain silent. Otherwise your silence will be used against us. Use your voice for us everywhere, whether it's workplace, media, politically, writing articles, anywhere. And keep in touch with us, but don't ask us little demeaning questions like, how are we, this, that. He goes, we're not fine. Treat us, think about, empathize with us, try and empathize with us. They also said, boycott, it makes us feel that we're not alone. They said, educate those around you who are not aware of the situation, bring them to events like this. We should be seeing people from the non-Muslim community here as well. We should be inviting them to these kind of events. They also said, and this is from their mouth, I've just got a few points left, teach your kids the history. That's something which, my generation, we weren't really taught this kind of history. But now that this has happened, they said, teach your kids history. And they said, at the same time, teach them Islam, because it is the lack of knowledge of Islam and its principles that led to a nation of weaklings. That's what they called the Arab states. They said a nation of weaklings, okay, who cannot stand up for justice and call out tyranny for what it is. And lack of knowledge of Islam will lead to one being easily made to feel ashamed of what he or she is. They also said tackle Islamophobia head on. It's intrinsically linked, because Islamophobia has enabled the world to watch on with a lack of feeling and empathy for the people of Gaza. This is their words, not mine. Be careful of how you construct your messages on your platforms. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, you're always saying this many women and children have been killed. They said, what about us? Are all us men terrorists? So they say that men have been killed as well. Don't just say it's just women and children, women and children. And then I asked them, okay, what that you have seen makes you happy? They said, when people go for change and are not afraid to speak the truth, because then, only then we feel they are sacrificing with us. Because you are sacrificing potentially your job. You are like when they saw the encampments in the universities, they said they are sacrificing the chance of getting their degrees. They said, we felt this, we loved this, okay? And they loved the protests as well. They said, keep going to the protests, but they had a message that said, don't turn them into concerts. Don't turn them into fun events, days out and this, that and the other. Keep the meaning, keep hold of the meaning of why we're going there. So overall, I've seen the changes in the society over the span of 8 months on this ridiculous massacre. I've seen the changes in psyche and the destroying of the fabric of society. This is what they wanted. The fabric of society is destroyed. If we really want to prevent Gaza turning into a disaster zone for the next 10 years, like Brother Yusuf said, the time is to act now, to lay it all on the line, to use your British privilege and your money that Allah has blessed you with. Make sure it doesn't become a punishment for you. Make a better future for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. I'm sorry I've been very, very blunt, but the cries of the oppressed and the blood of those slain seeps deep, not only into the ground of Gaza, but into our hearts also, where we hope that the green shoots of courage should grow and will grow to help the cause of the oppressed in whichever way we can. Jazakallah khair.